Hey y'all, welcome to the From Surviving to Thriving podcast, the place where we take the veil off and pull the curtains back on our everyday lives. I'm your host, Jackie. In this week's episode, we will be talking about dealing with the guilt of prioritizing yourself. If you have never felt any sort of guilt when it comes to prioritizing yourself, then consider yourself lucky. For me, it's one of the worst feelings in the world. I'm not sure if it's something that just empaths feel or if it's something that other people feel, but for me, that is something that I struggle with big time. In this episode, we will dive deeper into what it looks like to have that guilt and how to get over those feelings and focus on you. So let's get right into it. So before we go right into where that guilt comes from, I think it's best to start off with what is an empath? So empaths are people who are highly sensitive to the emotions, feelings, and energy of others. We tend to take on whatever other people are feeling. So if someone is feeling sad, an empath might pick up on that energy and start to feel sad. And if someone's happy, then we might pick up on that and also share in that happiness. So whatever feeling someone that is around us or we're in contact with has, we have a tendency to take on that feeling. Empaths tend to take on or experience deep concern for others that are around them. It doesn't matter if it's a stranger or if it's someone that's close to you. That kind of leads to the reason why we tend to feel guilty whenever we try to work on ourselves or put ourselves first. Because we're so used to tuning into the feelings of everyone else and caring so much about others, when it's time to focus on ourselves and care about ourselves, we have that sense of guilt. I know that I have a group of people that I care for in particular, so my empathetic side comes out a lot in my work environment. I'm also very protective of my friends and my family, people that I love and care about, and even sometimes strangers. Like, I'm that type of person that never wants to see someone getting taken advantage of or disrespected in any way, shape, or form. God forbid it's somebody that I love and care about, but I also don't have a problem sticking up for someone who's a total stranger that I feel is being taken advantage of. So now that we've addressed what an empath is, let's take a look at some of the reasons why we tend to feel guilty when it comes to prioritizing our needs and taking care of ourselves. So typically what happens with an empath is you realize that you have some sort of need to take care of yourself, put yourself first, and put everyone else on the back burner. So in my case, that need presented itself when that burnout happened and I had to take a step back and start focusing on myself. So that immediate need was now stop thinking about everyone else around you, stop thinking about work, stop thinking about your team, and start focusing on your own well-being. Now, as soon as I started to work on prioritizing my self-care, as soon as I decided to take that time off of work, as soon as I started to say no to certain things, that's when that internal conflict started. Because I'm so used to putting everyone else's needs in front of my own, as soon as I had to make that switch, I started to struggle. I started to have the feeling of letting people down. I started to question myself, like, am I being selfish by taking the time to focus on myself? And all of those thoughts started like running through my mind. Then those thoughts turned into anxiety. Having those guilty thoughts started to stress me out, and I started to have anxiety about, okay, well, what are these people thinking about me now? What are they feeling at work? Are they concerned about what I'm doing? Are they thinking negative things about me? How are they looking at me taking time off? Do they believe that I'm going through all the things that I'm going through? Like, all of those things started going through my mind, and I started to have anxiety when it came to work and thinking about work. That also led to me starting to question whether I really am feeling the way that I'm feeling. Like, is something really wrong with me, or am I just thinking that something's wrong with me? Do I really need to take this time off to take care of myself? Or can I figure something else out? Should I go back to work and try to figure it out that way? So I started like trying to justify things in my own head and casting doubt on my own feelings and things that I was going through. It got to the point where, like, I've never had, prior to this, I'd never had what felt like anxiety, like, attacking my body. Like, I started feeling like out of nowhere, my heart would just start racing, and I would just be like feeling all out of my own body. It was a weird feeling, and it would just come and go. I had no control over when it was going to come. I had no control over when it was going to leave. Like, I would be sitting in my bedroom, in my bed, and all of a sudden I just feel like my heart is pumping out of my chest. I don't know why. Nothing happened. I don't know if it was just like unconscious thoughts that were going on in my brain or what, but whatever the situation was, it would happen at the most random time. I would explain it to my doctor, and he was like, oh, it's just you being anxious. It's probably just your anxiety. And I mentioned it in some of my therapy sessions, and again, my therapist explained that, it sounds like I'm just having anxiety, but to keep, track of when it's coming, how often it's coming, why, it's coming, maybe what was I thinking about when it happened, what was I doing when it happened. A lot of the times I just felt like it came out of nowhere. I honestly couldn't just isolate it to one simple situation. I think it was just like the thoughts that were in my mind or whatever was weighing on me that was triggering my anxiety. I finally got to the point where I was able to figure out what it was that was triggering that feeling. And it took about a month of me being off of work. And even though I was technically on leave, we all have, especially when you work remotely, we all have like the apps on our phones, especially when you're a team lead or a manager. You have teammates that are reaching out to you. Especially for me, I work for a global company, so my teammates are up all hours of the day because we're in different time zones. So there are times when my teammates are just getting up to go to work and I'm going to bed. So I get messages all hours of the day and night. So I have the app on my phone, and of course those messages were still coming through to my phone. And some of them I would be able to see, and others, I'll just, swipe up or swipe away. But even though I was on leave, and technically I'm not supposed to be getting these messages, I'm not supposed to be working, I still was seeing them, and I still was getting the notification to my phone. And at the time, I did not realize how that was actually impacting me until one day I was having a therapy session, and I was discussing, some of the things that I was feeling when it came to work. And I might have mentioned that, I still see the messages and, I responded to certain messages at some point. And my therapist asked me why I felt the need to do that. And I sat there and I thought about it and I'm like, yeah, why am I doing that? Why am I so concerned about these messages? Technically, I'm on leave, which means I shouldn't even be getting messages from work. I'm supposed to be taking a break from it all, which means shut it off. And it didn't dawn on me until then that, dang, I'm off of work, but I'm really not off of work because I'm still looking at these messages. I'm still getting these notifications, and I'm not even detaching myself from what was a part of the problem as to why I was off in the first place. So that day, I decided to go in and turn off all notification and anything that was coming through from work. I stopped looking at my laptop and shut off my Slack messages. And ever since I did that, I started to see that my anxiety was gone. It was like I wasn't having those feelings anymore. And it didn't make sense until I sat back and thought about it. Like, yeah, the thing that I really changed was I cut that part of me off so that I could focus on myself and my well-being. That little action that I took to focus on myself, let go of the guilt of not being at work, not checking those messages to still feel, like I'm a part of the team and I'm doing my part even though I'm off. All of that got cut off, and that basically got rid of that anxiety that I was having. So a lot of the guilt also comes from overthinking about the situation. We tend to make up scenarios in our mind as to what we think people are thinking about us, or what reactions people are having to our inaction, or us saying no, or us prioritizing ourselves. We automatically create these stories for ourselves, which majority of the time, those aren't really probably, these things are probably far from what someone is actually thinking. But because of how we overthink, we automatically go to the negative impacts that our decisions and our actions are having on someone else, and we latch on to those. And that's another place where that guilt comes from. We also tend to imagine the worst case scenarios in the situation. So regardless of what we think is happening, like for me, when it came to work, of course I know that they can survive without me. If I was off, they would have someone take care of my team. That's what happens when I go on vacations. Someone step in and take care of my team. But it was just oh my God, can my team function without me? Who's going to make sure that they have my teammates back the way that I have my teammates back? I wonder what they're thinking. I wonder how they're feeling. Who's responsible for them? Oh no, the person that's over them now is not someone that I have faith and trust in. So now I'm worried about my team. So I'm like automatically going to the extreme of the worst case scenario that can happen, which is the reason why your anxiety levels start to spike as well. And in the midst of all of these things that are happening, then you start to criticize yourself. On top of that, you start to feel like, well, dang, why can't I function enough to be able to do both? Why can't I take care of myself and still be able to take care of my team, and still be able to help this person, and still, like, you start looking at yourself like you're the bad guy for trying to take care of yourself because you feel like you no longer can fulfill the roles that you've given to yourself. Some of the worst things that concerns us as empaths when we decide to put ourselves first is the fact that we start to think about or worry about what people will feel towards us. Like, oh, if I stop helping this person or if I stop doing for this person, then they'll start to look at me as if I don't have that value in their life anymore. You start to fear that rejection from that person or disapproval coming from that person. We also tend to take on this sense of responsibility for other people's well-being. Like other people can't take care of themselves or something. So we have to assume the responsibility of making sure that everyone is fine. So we take on their emotions and forget our own needs. We're big on taking on the heavy weight of everyone and everything around us. Like, I've had to check myself a lot recently, just taking on other people's issues and emotions and then making that a part of me and my issue. Recently, I had a situation with one of my siblings, and we were talking about something that was happening, and I could sense that he was feeling down about the situation, and it was from that conversation and I understanding what the situation was, it was like my day started to change, my mindset started to change, my thought process started to change because I started taking on his emotions and how he was feeling, and instead of it becoming his issue and his emotion and his feelings, it started becoming mine as well. So I had to take a step back and be like, wait a minute, what am I doing? Like, I get it, I understand what the situation is, but I can't take that on. Like, I can't be responsible for his feelings and what's going on in his day. I still have my own day to focus on. I had to focus on my day and all the things that I had to deal with and push his responsibilities and his feelings and his issues away from me. Even if I hear it and I understand where someone's coming from, I had to learn that it's not my responsibility to take on that load, because that heavy load that that person is carrying is now becoming my load too. And it's not mine, it's theirs. And I need to understand that I can let them carry it and I can still be of support, but I don't have to take that on myself. One of the main things that you have to do when it comes to that guilt is acknowledging that you have that guilt. So the first time that I really faced the harsh reality of deciding to put myself first and facing that guilt was during one of my therapy sessions. We had to complete some forms for work. So my therapist and we were discussing the amount of time that we think I would need in order to accomplish all the things that I needed to accomplish in order to go back to work full time and not be feeling burnt out or overwhelmed anymore. And as we were in the midst of discussing all of this, like, I literally started to break down. And all that was flashing through my mind was, how am I going to be looked at by my management team? How are my teammates going to take the news that I need to be out for an extended period of time? And what if they think that I'm being lazy and not wanting to come to work? Or is it too much time for me to take away from my job and focus on myself? And finally, like, who's going to be taking care of my teammates the way that I take care of my teammates? Like, I'm the mama bear. I'm the type of team lead that protects my teammate from everything else. Like, I know my team obviously better than everyone else. So I was just concerned, like, who's going to come in and be able to fill my shoes for them? And that was tough for me to take. And while we were having this conversation, my therapist said to me, because we've had these conversations before, especially during some of the homework assignments that I've done, and me determining the roles that I play in my daily life. And I'm always talking about protecting my people and watching over them and making sure that they're good and allowing them the time that they need, and fighting for them and pushing back on leadership because I'm protecting my team. And she said to me, like, if this was one of your teammates that was coming to you to let you know what was going on in their lives, how would you handle it? Like, what would you say to them? And my first instinct is to always be like, take the time that you need to take care of yourself to make sure that you're good. I'm always the team lead that says, you're sick, go take care of yourself. You have family issues, go take care of your family. You can get another job. You can't get another self. It's a lot easier to find another job than to fix things that you could have handled just because you wanted to be at work. So anytime I had any teammate that came to me with any sort of issues, your job is secondary at this point. Sorry, not sorry. Like, I'm about my people. I'm about my people's well-being, because at the end of the day, if my people and my teammates aren't good, they're not going to be able to produce the good work that I need them to produce. So I'm always the type of team lead that says, go and take care of yourself. And I am willing to extend that grace to my team, but when it came time to extend that same grace to myself, I couldn't find it in myself to do that. So it took her bringing that to my attention to say, hey, I've heard you say these things when it comes to your teammates. So why aren't you saying the same thing about yourself, is basically the point that she was trying to drive home. That's when I realized, like, yeah, those concerns that were going through my mind and was triggering that emotional response, yeah, they're valid things that I need to acknowledge, but those shouldn't be the first things that comes to my mind when I'm having a conversation with my therapist and we're talking about my treatment plan. The things that I should be thinking about is, okay, this is obviously a little bit more severe than I had imagined that it was, and maybe I really need to take this time and focus on myself. But that was the furthest thing from my mind. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about how to deal with that guilt that we feel. So one of the ways that we can do that is to rationalize with ourselves why we need to make the decision to focus on ourselves or to take care of ourselves, or make ourselves the priority. We need to point out to ourselves the fact that it's important for us to put our self-care first. We can't be of any good to anyone unless we are also good. So our well-being is just as important. So we need to rationalize that with ourselves. Another thing that we can do or tend to do is to seek out the validation of others. So we might go to our friends or family members and say, hey, this is how I'm feeling, and I know I've done it, and this is what I'm thinking about doing. What do you think? Like, am I being selfish, or am I just really putting my own needs first? What do you think? I know for a fact I've done this. I've gone to some cousins or brothers and sister and say, hey, am I looking at this the wrong way? Am I the selfish one? Or do I really need to just focus on myself? And getting the reassurance from someone that you value their opinion and trust them is definitely one way to boost that confidence in the decision that guilt is really unrealistic. Something else that us empaths need to learn to do and practice is having compassion for ourselves and giving ourselves the same grace that we give other people. So we are always so willing to extend grace to others, and we are quick to recognize when someone else needs to focus on themselves and, support their own self. But we don't do that and practice that same thing for ourselves. So we need to give ourselves that same amount of compassion that we would give to someone else. That way we can feel like, you know what, I'm deserving of being able to be kind to myself and take care of myself without feeling guilty doing it. And of course, with everything that we do, having a balance is important. So there's nothing wrong with being an empath as long as we're balancing ourselves and others. So we're not giving others everything and we're not giving others everything and giving ourselves nothing. We have to be able to meet at some sort of level playing field, or even be a little selfish, yes, a little selfish, and give yourself more. Because at the end of the day, if you aren't taking care of yourself, how can you have enough to give to others? So if you're giving so much and not recognizing that your cup is getting empty, when the cup's empty, how are you going to pour in other people's cup? And I think that's where I made the biggest mistake, is I was so busy pouring into everyone else's cup that my cup got empty and I couldn't refill my own cup because I'd given all of whatever I had away. I didn't have enough to replenish my own self. So empaths have to learn how to balance. Give some away, but make sure that you're getting some back, or not only that you're getting some back, that you're also replenishing it yourself. Over time, as you start to practice, as you start to put this into practice, you will start to build up that level of resiliency where after a while, you don't have to be so conscious of it, because it'll come natural. But I know for me right now, I'm consciously working on it. But I know at some point I will get to the point where I know in the future I will get to the point where it's normal for me to be putting myself first and then worrying about other people after. But now I'm working on it. Once that level of resilience is built up, then you know that you are able to set healthy boundaries as to what you're willing to do when it comes to others versus what you're doing for yourself. So having those boundaries set and recognizing that your self-care and your prioritization of yourself is important, over time it will become second nature if you continue to practice that. So to wrap this all up, we know that dealing with the feeling of guilt can be a real hindrance to your self-care if you don't recognize it and work through it. Me finding out that I was having those feelings of guilt and addressing them was not easy by any means, but I knew that I still had to put myself first, and that was hard to do because this is something that I've been doing for so long that switching up and changing my patterns was pretty difficult at first. It definitely takes an unlearning process of I'm taking on things that don't belong to me. I need to focus on my own well-being right now and push back on anything that is for someone else to carry. And being able to differentiate your feelings from the feelings of others can get a little bit blurry when it comes to empaths, but just focusing on yourself, and I know that sounds selfish, but focusing on yourself and your own situation will help you recognize, hey, this is something that I need to pick up and carry, or this is not something that I need to be carrying. This belongs to someone else and I'm about to give it back. You have to make a conscious decision daily that you're going to choose yourself. You're going to put yourself first, especially in the beginning, because it does not come as second nature to us. If you're an empath, that's the furthest thing from your mind. You are more concerned about the feelings of everyone else. So it takes intent and conscious decision making to put yourself first. So I had to make the conscious decision to choose myself and my well-being. So regardless of all the negative thoughts that I was having about who was going to think of me as the lazy one that decided that I couldn't take the pressures of the job and I needed to take time off, didn't matter to me anymore. No matter how much I thought that other people's conversations about me would show me in a negative light, it didn't matter to me anymore. I still needed to choose myself. And no matter how much I felt my family and friends would look at me different when they hear me say no a lot more than I ever did, I still had to choose me and put myself first. So regardless of what was happening, at the end of the day, I had to choose myself and put myself first, and everything else and everyone else who wasn't with the program had to exit stage left. I made the commitment to setting boundaries for myself and others. I had to learn balance. I had to learn to take care of myself while also unlearning the self-doubt and the criticism and overthinking everything and making up those stories in my own head that has nothing to maybe do with reality. It's just my thoughts of what people are thinking of me. Choosing you is going to be really hard, but honestly, it's the only way that you can really heal and recover from this whole situation. You have to choose you. I hope that you found this episode on dealing with guilt to be helpful. Maybe you can now recognize the reasons why you have been feeling that sense of guilt and wanting to put yourself first. It's okay to feel it. Just accept it, work through it, and still put yourself first. If you have some other insights in ways that you have found to be successful in putting yourself first, feel free to share that information in the comments below. Someone might be able to benefit from your advice. Tune into next week's episode where I will share the reason why I decided to take that trip, which I have now named my Eat, Pray, Self-Love Journey. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye.